Hey neighbor, welcome back to Beyond ARTV. My name is John, and pop punk is a genre that most seem to either love or hate, often causing a knee-jerk reaction when the scene is brought up in either a positive or negative light. Fans of my channel seem to generally understand that the genre is kind of in limbo for my music taste, yet those who discredit my work seem to falsely claim that it's all I listen to and that I only care about bands like Blink-182 or Paramore. Although I can be hypercritical of the generic tendencies of the genre, I thought it would be fun to make an episode of Hate It or Love It dedicated exclusively to 5 reasons why people hate pop punk. These of course won't be my reasons, just those of the internet as a collective. From Quora to YouTube videos to Facebook groups and various subreddits, I've done my homework trying to scour the web and figuring out what makes this style of music so divisive. Pop punk originated as an offshoot of punk rock in the 1970s, with bands like the Ramones considered possible flag planters for the genre, although it wouldn't be until the early 90s and labels like Lookout Records pushing little indie acts that you might have heard of before like Green Day until they crossed over into the mainstream. The 2010s saw the decline of pop punk on the charts as the emo bands from the 2000s that embraced this sound either faded in popularity or else took up their style to the point where they were virtually unrecognizable to that world. There were a few acts like 5 Seconds of Summer pushing for that sound, although they've since shifted sails, and now in 2020, you've got those who grew up on pop punk, like Halsey and Machine Gun Kelly, attempting to bring back the sound to the modern youth. Let's put it all on the table. Is this a style of music worth hating? I'll weigh in with my opinion on each of these points as we go along, but before we do that, here's a few modern bands in that scene that definitely have some form of pop punk in their DNA that are definitely worth your time. Stand Atlantic, Belmont, Joyce Manor, Bonsai Tree, 4 Years Strong, The Wonder Years, Spanish Love Songs, Capstan, Boston Manor, Pump, Slutface, Heart Attack Man, Modern Baseball, The Story So Far. I could go on, and I'm not even saying that all of these groups are strictly pop punk, but those are some suggestions, not even including the classics like the Offspring and Blink-182. I hope this video is informative and provides different perspectives for you, and if you dig it, then swiftly chop that like button and literally die for pop punk, if you're not a fake poser that doesn't even mosh. Punk rock purists. Oh man, those can be hard to wrestle with. I've gotten into arguments with punk purists in the past, those who dismiss the likes of Blink-182 and even the new waves of bands like Neck Deep and The Story So Far, and it can be hard to get into their head, the idea that somebody can take elements and styles, like the fast drumming or maybe even the way that the chords progress in the songs, and they aren't necessarily playing punk music, they have poppy tendencies, big hooks, and they say, hey, this is a sellout move. This is an argument that's been going on since the 1990s, maybe even before that, and it's a tired argument if you ask me. I think a lot of people see this as some sort of teeny bopper thing, and if you associate it with bands like 5 Seconds of Summer and their early material, or even other groups like Good Charlotte that can be kind of cringy to look back upon, I do understand that, but there are genuinely compelling things going on in the world of pop punk, and if you dismiss it all as just a sellout because they're not doing it DIY like you did, then that's really just being a gatekeeper, and I've never been a fan of gatekeepers, so I really don't think this is a strong argument to stand on. Whininess in pop punk and their vocalists only talking about not getting laid by their girlfriends or getting broken up with by their girlfriends, that is a stereotype, and it's one that does fit. I mean, the shoe will definitely slide right on for some of these bands. I don't want to get into naming too many names, but I do feel that a lot of acts, especially in the 2000s, it became oversaturated and it became a stereotype for a reason. I think now, looking at it all these years later, just singing about fitting in, it can at surface level appear that way, and I do feel that it can be kind of a whiny genre, and it's a personal preference thing. If you like the hard on the sleeve type appeal, then you're probably going to be drawn to pop punk. Is it a valid criticism of the genre? Sure, I guess, if that's not something that's your cup of tea, but is it fair to call the entire genre just whiny, something that just talks about something where they want to be in this relationship or they're not sure if they can figure it out? I really hate my hometown. I get that fact. I've heard enough Simple Plan to know that, and trust me, I don't stand by those type of bands, but I do feel that you need to look a little bit closer because there's other bands out there killing it in the genre that don't necessarily talk about just those topics. As somebody who's a non-musician myself, it can be a little bit hard to comment on this one, but at number 3, we have people talking about the fact that the chords, they're all the same chord progressions, and the simplistic riffs, they don't do anything for me. Pop punk can definitely feel formulaic, like there's a map, a blueprint laying around somewhere, and all of these bands are just passing it around, looking at each other's notes and copying homework. I get that, and I do feel that it's a valid criticism. I think a lot of pop punk does suffer from the fact that they build up in the exact same way, and a lot of these songs do sound eerily similar, but that can also be the case for punk, and a lot of times it's the punk purists arguing against this. Now, punk and pop punk, and really any genre at all, is going to have its bloated limbs, the ones that weigh down the entire vessel. But I don't necessarily see pop punk as being one of those things where it's just like a metalcore where they get to the point where it's like, oh my god, there's an ocean full of them. I mean, maybe like the Great Lakes or something, but not an entire ocean. Wait a minute, did I just write a pop punk song? I'm drowning in your ocean, girl, except your tears, all they give me is the Great Lakes, and somebody put a riff to this. Pop punk is an oxymoron. Punk rock was supposed to be anti-commercial, it was supposed to be underground, it was not mainstream friendly, and now pop punk, of course, is contradicting itself because, oh, you've got pop in it, it's hitting the charts, and you had everybody from Avril Lavigne to Good Charlotte to Blink-182, and even in modern times you've got Halsey putting pop punk songs, sort of at least, on the charts. It's really confusing, and I get why some people would see that and feel alienated because they don't necessarily want to support something. They want it to be a little bit more underground. They want it for themselves, and putting pop in it, that's just like giving it right back to the man, right? Applying the term oxymoron, though, would definitely be correct here because pop punk does, in its own name, kind of undermine the entire movement. I understand that it needed a tag, it needed to have a genre because there were people that were borrowing elements from this, but they weren't necessarily playing punk rock. It's like if we're talking about alternative hip-hop, it's something that maybe uses something from hip-hop, but they're also using some guitar grooves and something else in there. There's things that are taken and things that are borrowed from certain genres, but they're not entirely built upon that backbone. It can get really complicated and messy with pop punk, so I encourage you, just don't even give in, don't get into the argument, because it's not worth it and you're probably not going to convince anyone of anything. Finally, we arrive at point number 5, and it's one that I've definitely experienced firsthand. The community of pop punk fans that can be kind of toxic and they have this elitist mentality. Now granted, we're not talking about anything on the level of K-pop stans and that fandom, my god, what a nightmare, but it's almost even worse because with pop punk, you can see the individual cynical comments. They can be so quick to pull the trigger on their former favorite band that's now trying something new, and now you're curb stomping them and saying, hey, I'm never buying your material again. It can be a cutthroat industry if you're in the world of pop punk, and there's so many accusations. I've seen so many toxic environments. It's starting to change, but this genre has seriously lagged behind. That's one reason why I don't find myself getting too excited about too many modern pop punk bands. I think that there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, maybe even some gatekeeping within the genre where people don't feel comfortable talking about certain issues, even women in pop punk. I know it's been something that Hayley Williams of Paramore has talked about at length, and it can be tricky. It can be very confusing. And I feel like arguing with a pop punk fan over, oh, which riff is the best, which band deserves to elevate, and then as soon as they get popular, we're gonna throw them out the window. It can be tricky, and the entire community is definitely not like that. I've seen the Pop Punkers subreddit, and there's genuinely some good stuff getting shared over there, some positivity, but there's also those lurking in the corners waiting at any corner to pounce. They're waiting for their opportunity, and they're waiting to bring it down, and that's a huge part of why pop punk has such a bad reputation. What do you guys think? I pass the question on to you as I say, is it a genre worth hating? Do you understand why people hate it? Or is it one of your absolute favorites? Maybe a lot of your bands have incorporated some of those sounds because there's so many in the modern scene that do it, from Water Parks to The Story So Far and a whole lot more. There's definitely talent there, but there's also a lot of problems. That is just my personal opinion, but I would love to know your thoughts on any of the 5 points that I presented on why the internet hates pop punk. Here's a question for you if you don't really have anything to say about pop punk. Are there other genres that you'd like to see me do this with? If this video does well, then I will consider doing that in the future. Drop a like to show support for this video, and subscribe for the motherfucking love of music, people! Other than that, you can find me on social media. All of these links are found in the description down below. I've got a couple of recent videos, including another episode of Hate It or Love It, floating on screen now, and I will see you soon for more right here on Beyond ARTV.